I'd like to thank Brownlee LLP for sponsoring SUMA's Candidate School. Thanks to Brownlee, all Candidate School sessions are being offered free of charge. Today's presenters can answer your questions on the roles and responsibilities of council. However, some questions may require a larger discussion or are beyond the scope of today's session. During the Municipal Governance 101 session, Toby Duck from Government Relations Municipal Advisory Services answered many questions relating to the roles and responsibilities of council. We encourage you to review the recording of Municipal Governance 101, which is available on SUMA's website. And if you have any additional questions for advisory services with government relations, please call 306-787-2680 or email muniinfo@gov.sk.ca. SUMA encourages elected officials to seek additional education by participating in our offerings such as webinars, member meetings, and our annual convention. If elected, you will have access to all previous webinars and member resources through the SUMA member portal, and a copy of the newly elected handbook developed by SUMA will be provided to your municipality to share with you. I also encourage you to listen to SUMA's podcast, Municast, to hear insights on municipal leadership from a variety of perspectives. Municast is available on all major podcast platforms. The Municipal Leadership Development Program is a great opportunity for elected officials to gain a deeper understanding of their role. SUMA will be hosting the Municipal Leadership Roles and Responsibilities module in January of 2025, and more information about those sessions will be released soon. Modules from the MLDP program are also held on the Saturday before the SUMA Convention and Trade Show. Visit mldp.ca to learn more about the program. SUMA also partners with organizations to provide services that support municipalities. One of these services is the Brownlee Municipal Helpline. It's an informational consultation service offered free of charge to Saskatchewan municipalities. It's now my pleasure to welcome back Whitney Mosley, lawyer with Brownlee LLP. I would also like to welcome Mayor Mike Strachan, Mayor for the Village of Torquay, and Vice President of Villages, Resort Villages, and Northern Municipalities on the SUMA Board of Directors. They're both going to be responding to your questions today. I would also like to introduce Mason Stott, Advocacy and Legal Services Advisor with SUMA, who will moderate today's session. I'm now going to let Mason take it over from here.
Thanks, Stephanie. So thanks everyone for joining. So yeah, please, if any questions you have, you can put them in the Q&A. And while I'm waiting for some questions to get populated in the Q&A, I will read out the first question that was pre-submitted. And this question is, we'll start with Mayor Strachan, but Whitney, you feel free to contribute to the answer too if you want. So the question is, are there difficulties retaining certified administrators in villages? If so, why?
Well, that's a great question to start off with, Mason. So in my community, Torquay, we've actually had to deal with this. So we've lost an administrator and hired a new one. There is a shortage of administrators in Saskatchewan. We have 700 plus municipalities in Saskatchewan. One of the things we find is the education process for training administrators usually takes about a year. So in villages, my village, the administrator works 4.5 days a week. Certain municipalities are 1 day, some are 2, some are 3. But that working arrangement sometimes doesn't work to find administrators. And it's something at SUMA we really worked hard at. We started a program with the U of R for training administrators. That might be helping. We're trying to get into schools to try and recruit administrators. One of those things that's not talked about in the education system in Saskatchewan, that it's a job for people to work in their home communities, and we're trying to change that narrative around at SUMA. But needless to say, I'm going to be brutally honest, it's tough to find administrators, and even for the communities that have brought in administrators from New Brunswick, Manitoba, it's all different acts that they need to learn, and so the training is different. So it's unique to Saskatchewan. And if you're thinking you're going to get on council to remove your administrator, I would suggest maybe try and work with your administrator to find a better solution, because it is tough, and not having an administrator to run your day-to-day operations, especially in a village when you may only have 1 or 2 staff, is really tough. And I don't want to say it's all great, but I think the people on this call want to know what they need to know, and I think that's important to tell people that finding an administrator is tough.
Great, thanks, Mike. So I don't see any questions in the Q&A yet. So I'll go to the second one, which was pre-submitted. And this one's also, I'll start with Mike. If elected as mayor, how do you start running a council meeting without any experience?
That was me. That was me 15 years ago. My first council meeting. I I walked in and I actually looked at my administrator and said, "What do I do? What what do I do?" And leading into that last question, you have to rely on your administrator somewhat. And for me, it was I kind of read over some Robert rules of order, and you can find that on the internet. Kind of helped me through the process a little bit, but ultimately the administrator helped walk me through it. And I had a couple of experienced counselors on council before, which led me through it. I can tell you my first meeting was an absolute failure. I can tell you it didn't run smoothly. There was lots of errors. But we worked through it, and that process actually helped the rest of my council know how to run a meeting too. So just because you may not know how to do it as mayor walking into the meeting, it may be helpful for the rest of your council to learn together and to become for lack of a better term, coercive unit to work better. And ultimately, I think it helped my council understand why we do things the way we do it. It certainly helped me because there was some things when I went on to council that I wanted to change that I couldn't change. And finding out the rules and the way things are done and why they're done, I think it helped my council be a better council. And that was 15 years ago. And hopefully we've been doing things right. I guess we haven't heard from government relations, so we have been doing things properly. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Your administrator will help you walk through the process. So that would be my advice, Mason.
I'd just like to add as well, you can always review your municipality's procedure bylaw, which will give you a sense of generally these are the rules that you should be following. And many municipalities post or air their council meetings online. So if you watch just a few of them, even if it's not your municipality, you can just have a general sense of how these types of meetings run.
And I would say, please do not watch and I was talking to Mayor Masters from Regina, please don't watch Regina's council meetings because they're run a little crazy right now. But yeah, and I think in a lot of villages things aren't posted, but even just go back and read the old minutes. It'll say the motion, who moved it, how it was voted on, and it'll tell you somewhat of a guide of when motions need to be made. And yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes is what I've told my council. And if there's errors made, you can always reverse those errors to the next council meeting as well. So
Great, thanks for those insights. The third question that we had pre-submitted was, and I'll start with Whitney for this one, can a person go into the town office and see minutes from meetings?
Yeah, all council meetings minutes are public information, so you can request those from your municipality. And many municipalities also post them online after meetings are done.
I would add to that, Whitney, that they also they can see the previous meetings minutes before they've been or they have to be approved by council before members can see it of the public. So we've had instances where people have walked in right after the council meeting and asked for the minutes, and they haven't been approved by council for people to see. So just make sure that those minutes have been approved for people to see so they can go through the errors or omissions.
Great, thanks for that. Another question, and I'll go to Whitney for this one first, is if there is a conflict of interest, is the expectation to declare a conflict and leave council chambers, or can the council member stay in the room?
So the general requirement is that if you're in a conflict of interest, you need to leave the room, just so it eliminates that person's influence from the decision and minimizes sort of the risk of a perceived conflict. The exception, though, is if the councillor, as a taxpayer or a property owner, has a right to be heard by council, then you're not required to leave the room. Sort of a basic example of this is with a zoning bylaw amendment, there needs to be a public hearing. So you might be in a conflict of interest because the proposed change sort of substantially decreases the value of a property you own. So you're in a conflict, but you still have a right to be heard in a public hearing. So you wouldn't be required to leave the room in that situation. But generally you are required to leave the room.
And I would also add to that, Mason, that please make sure your administrator or whoever is recording the minutes records the time that the conflict was declared and when you left the room, just to cover for liability issues.
Okay, great. And I just had a follow-up question on that actually for virtual meetings. How do you deal with conflict of interests when you're in a Zoom or a Teams meeting?
Whitney, you can take that one.
I think it's a matter of leaving the meeting and then rejoining the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
So make sure you have their text number so they can be alerted to come back to the meeting.
Right, so they know when to join. Yes,
Yep.
exactly. So this one, actually, Steph can respond to this one, I think. Is there any suggested training that will be offered through SUMA for elected officials?
So SUMA does partner with the MLDP program. So that's the Municipal Leadership Development Program that I spoke to a little bit in the opening. We do host the Municipal Leadership Roles and Responsibilities course from within that program. And there will be 2 sessions held in January. One will be in Prince Albert and one will be in Moose Jaw. And more information about those will be released soon. Each summer, we also hold a summer school event for mayors and councillors. And during that session, you also receive a credit for that Municipal Leadership Roles and Responsibility course. So those are our main suggested education pieces. And then through SUMA, we also offer webinars throughout the year that you're welcome to attend. And they are on a variety of topics that are relevant to municipal leadership.
Great, thanks, Steph. Next question, and this one we'll start with Mike, is it good practice for a council member to take on a supervisory role over maintenance workers or the foreman?
Well, in my community, we have a unique situation, and Whitney, you'll maybe have to speak to this, but from my experience, no, council should not be directing any foreman. The only real employee of council is the administrator. But in Torquay's situation, what we have is the administrator's husband is our foreman. And so we have set up a team of counselors along with the administrator to deal with HR and things like that, just to get around the conflict of the wife overseeing the husband. And so we can be a little more above board and it doesn't look like favoritism. So Whitney, interested to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I'd deal with that situation in particular. But yeah, generally their council should not be involved in day-to-day operations of municipalities.
Very much so. The other thing I would say is in Torquay's situation where we have one employee, and before we hired this employee, we actually had a contractor. So what would happen is sometimes we would have nobody to remove snow if there was an emergency. So on a volunteer basis, council members would go out, and according to government relations, we can't do that because of liability issues. And but there is the understanding that if it's an emergency situation, council members can do the work under voluntary circumstances if it's an emergency situation.
The last question, which was pre-submitted, and this one might be better for government relations. So I know that Steph put the Municipal Advisory Services email and telephone number in the chat, but I will ask the question if Mike or Whitney have any insights. But the question is, what is the policy rationale behind not allowing seasonal owners in a village not to run for council?
Well, my understanding would be that they're already voting in a different municipality. But I don't know. I've never asked that question. So that's a very interesting question, Mason. And I don't know if there's any resort village people on this call, but I'm guessing it's all villages. But resort villages are kind of a unique situation in Saskatchewan. So they do have some different rules according to the act, although they do follow the municipal act. So my thoughts would be that it's just because they don't live there full time, and if you look at census numbers, that doesn't count either if they don't live there full time. So it might be just one of those unique situations for resort villages.
Great, thanks for that insight. So I actually don't see any questions in the Q&A, and I don't see any questions in the chat. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to populate it in the Q&A. I've gone through all of the pre-submitted questions. And Steph, I don't think I missed anything. I'll just double check with you.
No, I'm not seeing anything that you've missed.
Mason, can I ask a question? Where is Mark Kinch, Jolynn Brodner? I'd love to know where that is. I thought I knew where most villages in Saskatchewan were. So. And I see Debbie at Candle Lake said we did have seasonal people on council in one.
So while we're just waiting to see if there's a reply from Joy Lynn on where Mark Hinch is. Oh, it's about 35 minutes northwest of Regina.
Nice. Thank you.
So then if there aren't any additional questions, I'm going to launch a poll on the screen right now. If you could please take a moment to fill that out. It helps SUMA improve our offerings. So we'd really appreciate your feedback. If anyone does have any additional questions, please do feel free to enter them into the Q&A, as we do still have some time. But I'd like to thank you very much, Whitney and Mike, for taking the time to share your expertise with us. And I hope those who joined us today feel more confident in making their decision to run for municipal government. And so thank you all again for taking the time to be here.
So staff, just before everybody goes, just thinking about the conflict of interest question, and I know I said that the administrator should mark down the time the person left and when they came back, but they also need to realize that when they go out in the community, the municipal councillors should not be talking to that other councillor about that conflict of interest. They shouldn't be bringing up the information that was discussed in the meeting, because that needs to be kept between council members and not shared with the councillor that declared a conflict of interest. So because you could get into some trouble if you do. So just wanted to put that in there as well.
No, thank you very much, Mike. I think that's a good point for people to be aware of. Okay, so I'm still not seeing any questions in the Q&A, so we will end the session for tonight. Thank you very much again, everyone, for being here, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care.
Thank you for your interest in running for council.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.